When people talk, listen, man, I'm going to raise that red flag.
This narrative, especially after 1 year, one bad year, it's one big splash move. And because I don't think people understand how much cap space we can create.
Alex, I want to ask you, because you're a very humble person.
And I'm never going to be right about anything.
Yeah.
I was right. What's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in. I got a very special guest today. He's one of my content creator crushes. I talk about him all the time on Twitter. He just did a cool interview with Captain Munnerlyn, who's a Panther legend. John, what's up, man?
What's up, man? Glad to be here.
Dude, thank you so much for being here. I'm not kidding when I say like you're one of my like content creator crushes. Like I love when you come on. Love what you're doing. And I can't believe it took me so long to like find you. And because you're so much better at this than me, I'd love for you to kind of just run my show, kind of like your show, because you're more articulate, you're more engaging, all those things. And I want everybody to get a hold of that and understanding of that if they don't already know you, like I didn't know you. So I'm going to hand it off to you. Talk to us about One Carolina, Captain Munnerlyn interview, and honestly run the show better than I would.
Well, man, I appreciate it, man. Alex, I've been following you for a while, as far as, just on the X platform and, just seeing, what you're doing and your dedication, to all things Panthers. And, it doesn't just end with, a few topics here and there. It's like really deep diving. Like, I'd be lying to say that some of the things that I see, you talk about become topics, in their own way on my show. So appreciate your contribution to the space, man, and definitely keep, doing what you're doing. And I'm glad to see that you're back into the YouTube space because, it's good to have that kind of engagement in a long form content, perspective. So and you mentioned it. Just had an interview with Captain Munnerlyn. Couldn't have picked a better time considering the fact that he just took over as a high school football coach. And that became kind of a story in and of itself. And so it was, pretty cool to, have him, during that specific time. We talked about it, kind of a little bit, but he alluded to something big getting ready to happen, but he didn't actually, reveal it on the show that we did together, but, a day after or so or whatever. So, it was pretty cool, man. He was extremely gracious, and, he was an open book. You and I backstage talked about how, he asked questions and he's like, or I would ask him questions. He's like, hey, man, don't hold back. Like if you got something you really want to talk about, like, let it out. Like,
yeah, for real.
So, yeah, we went there on quite a few topics. Yeah.
Yeah, man. I love all this stuff. When you and Dunk together, that's probably that might be my favorite episode I've seen all season was you and Dunk talking.
Oh, wow.
Because
nice.
Here's why. Because I think a lot of what happens in all media is we get on these narratives, right? We get on these narratives that Panthers fans want to hear, or that we are willfully ignorant of what's going on. And then to have you and Dunk both be like, nah, this is what it feels like, obviously. Like I'm taking all fandom out of it. I want to look at it very, very objectively. If y'all aren't seeing it, y'all aren't seeing it. But I don't think that what you guys think is what's actually happening. And it made me feel better about myself because I feel like I get really negative on here sometimes because I'm just saying what I see.
Sure.
I would love to be positive, but I'm just telling you what I see. Go into more about and we're going to get into some Panthers actual content, and I think we should faster than before. But get into like how you get started in the space, where you see One Carolina going, because I think this guy's living.
Man, I appreciate that. Yeah, you're talking about the Dunk interview, man. Dunk is the standard. I can remember seeing Dunk, a few years back and really liking what he was doing. And, it is easy to look as fans, we're only beholden to greatness, right? You pay money for jerseys, you invest your time. Some people have stronger emotional attachments to the, teams than others. So, it's not above the idea of, having that kind of like, win now mentality. That was something that Cap talked about. Like, hey man, I want to win right now, right? I don't want to wait. I don't want to, Matt Rule 7-year build, even though I know he gets killed for that quote. I understand what he was saying when he was saying it. But at the same time, especially when you look at the context of like, players that we see on other teams right now that were on the roster during the time that he was here. And if that would have, had the opportunity to continue to build, maybe it does, click this year, and maybe instead of Washington, we're watching us, playing an NFC championship. So, and who knows? But the point is that, when talking with someone like him, and really the reason that I started my channel to begin with is because I wanted to have these kind of conversations, these Panther conversations with, a broad group of people, a broad range of people, right? Which is why one of the things that I pride myself in not doing too often is like, I don't really delete comments. I get positive comments. I get hateful comments, right? As long as it's not like a personal attack, like, hey, say what you got to say. I don't kick people out of chats, things like that, because I've been around and on shows before I even got started doing this, where it's like, it is more narrative shaped. It's like, hey, if you don't believe what I'm saying, then I got to get you out of here. And I'm like, well, that ain't really fair. You know what I'm saying? Like, if what I'm saying is not a personal attack, then why can't we just have a dialogue? Right.
Right.
And so that's what kind of prompted me, and I do this, and I don't know where we are as far as like, him and I, and on a personal level, well, it doesn't matter, but I always give the credence to me starting my channel to Big Cat from Keep Pounding TV. I saw him doing what he was doing. I really respected it. I saw what, the kind of engagement that he had. And honestly, I wanted a part of it. So I used to be someone that would call in on the show, and then I'm like, you know what, I'm going to start my own. And, he was gracious enough to give me an interview very early on when I had very few subscribers. Right. And so, yeah, I always give him his flowers, every time, because if it wasn't for him, there would be no me in this space. So, definitely got to salute to him. But been around since like 2021, took a few breaks off for some personal stuff, man. But I've been full throttle, this year, and plan on being this way from this point forward.
Yo, thank God for Big Cat, because I love the content, man.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man.
Yeah. So anyways, like I said, watching your show, I think it's we say Dunk's the standard. I think you're kind of the standard for me. I'd love for you to run this show as you would your own, and you kind of take over as hosting it. Mostly because you're more articulate, you're more straightforward, you're more. I'd rather you do it and me see what it's like when I'm editing and when I'm putting it up. So I can have something to have my standard be. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. You gotta give yourself more credit, man. I think you're gonna be better. You're already better at this than you give yourself credit for. So yeah, I think that but I certainly don't mind that, man. I'm honored, to be able to do that. And so yeah, let's roll, man. So
let's roll.
One of the things, backstage we were talking about this, and I know this isn't the very first topic, but I kind of wanted to cover this because it was fresh on my mind. Is when we were talking, and I was talking to Cap, and this is the first time I'm actually like talking about this live. So I'll save it for here. I won't talk about this anywhere else unless I'm just like pressed and asked about it. But like, a couple of Cap's, friends were like, hey man, do you have some clips that you could send us, push out there? And we'd like to push some stuff out there just to, show love to the interview. And I'm like, absolutely. And so the clip that they used was me asking Cap a question. And this is why I want to talk about the context behind that question, because it sounds like when you hear the clip that Cap's just going after Xavier Legette, and that's not the case. What I asked Cap was like, hey man, in light of what he has done this year, right? How do you feel in the locker room when you see like, the questions about his accent, or, the whole, bringing raccoon meat inside the locker room, or, the video of him and the squirrel and all that kind of stuff? Like, when you see that there were some struggles this year as a player, like I know as fans, like some fans are just like, man, let the guy be the guy. Like, you got to let him, have his freedom of expression, which I'm on that page as well. Right. I'll probably stand more on that side, but I'm sure that there's some other, fans, and I've seen this, that probably feel more like, hey man, like, can we tone that down a bit? Because, it seems like there's more emphasis put on that than there is like the fact that he has some struggles with catching. Like he's more of a body catcher than a hands catcher. And they've, sprung you into action as an X. And I asked Cap, I'm like, hey, what do you think about that? And I mean, he expressed himself freely. And he's like, hey, man, if it's me, like, it's time to put up or shut up. Like, the honeymoon period's over. I don't care about all that coon meat and all this accent and all that other kind of stuff. And it caught wildfire on Instagram. And, you know, some people, it was a very mixed bag of people about what they thought. Some people, there was former players, Brandon LaFell, Tom chimed in and he said, hey, man, I've kind of been waiting on somebody to say this. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, so clearly it's a thought that people have, but I also want to be mindful and sensitive to the fact that he is a rookie. And I also feel like, Alex, that he was kind of sprung into action because of something that happened that wasn't supposed to, right? So rewind back to the beginning of free agency. We bring in Deontay Johnson. When we're watching Blueprint, Deontay Johnson's in a room with Brad Isaac, and Brad's telling him, like, hey, man, we want you to be the X. You're going to be our primary receiver here. You're going to be the, you know, the premier. Everything is going to run through you, right? So they go draft Xavier Legette, likely with the concept in mind of, hey, we're going to give him time to develop. We're going to he's still going to be an active participant in the, you know, the scheme this year because he's a big body guy. Run him on a few drags, you know what I'm saying? Kind of put him on the Rashee Rice program, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe, or possibly the Deebo Samuels program, if you will. But then I think they saw some things in camp. You know, we saw some, you know, I saw videos from everybody from Dunk to For Panther Fans Only, all these guys that go to training camp and do the videos, which I'm super grateful for, right? Because I can't always be there for that. And so seeing those videos, he was doing stuff in camp that was surprising. Like, okay, we knew that he had, like, you know, high point catchability, stuff like that. But man, his first step, the rocker step in the middle of the route to kind of gain separation, you know what I'm saying? His recognition and picking up the, you know, routes, you know, and the concepts pretty easy was a lot more than maybe what we expected early on. So I think when the Deontay Johnson stuff started happening, all the, you know, in locker room stuff and things like that, I think it was an easier choice for them to make to just say, you know what, let's just go ahead and do away with him. And guess what? X, you're our X now, you know? And yeah, there's going to be some growing pains coming with that because he wasn't, you know, he only really had one bold year of that at South Carolina. So I just don't want to see, I guess really where my heart was when I asked the question is I'm like, I don't want to see us make a caricature of him. And the only thing that he's good for is like these accents and stuff like that. When it's in reality, like, nah, he's a dog. He's just a developing dog, if you will. So
I think that what we need in this locker room is actual leadership in the locker room, and that's what I've kept on saying about Adam Thielen. I don't think Adam Thielen came here to be a leader. I don't, and I don't think Deontay Johnson came in here to be a leader.
Interesting.
So they're not kind of setting the standard of what these guys should be like. Look at what Robert Hunt did. You saw the Icky the past 2 years and what he was like when he was talking to the media. Yeah. Robert Hunt comes to town, it ain't like that as much anymore. Like,
that's interesting.
And it might be because, you know, he's older. He might be he's just more of a vet now. But Robert Hunt has demonstrated, no, guys, this is the standard. I'm raising the standard for the O-line, and I'm the leader. And that's what you kind of bring in vets for, right? And I don't think Thielen wanted to be that last year. I don't think he was that this year. I don't think that Deontay Johnson had any interest in being that at all. So maybe you have like David Moore, but I don't know. But you got to have somebody there teaching these guys how to be professionals. Yeah. And when you have all the chaos of the locker room with the bench pricing, with the price benching, the Deontay Johnson trade, I think all that kind of goes in, and this guy's kind of left like, I'm the star now, I guess, because like who else, you know, kind of thing. Yeah. And he has to try to like, you know, have fun with the media, like Robert Hunt does, but he does it in a very professional way. So that's kind of how I feel about the Legette situation. But I'm with you, man. As far as Legette talent-wise, all I needed to see was how he got open against the Eagles.
Oh, yeah.
Man, like, he didn't catch the ball, but it's there. He's
absolutely got it.
He's got it, in my opinion. But yeah, that comes...
I couldn't agree more.
Do you want to go right into keep pounding thing? Because I think that's like a nice little segue into that. Yeah.
So one of the questions that you had posed to me is keep pounding dead or does identity matter? I 100% think it does, right? So let's rewind back to a story that happened 2 years ago. So team struggling. I think they had lost a game to New England, right? It was the Robbie Anderson, really upset, with Sam Darnold on the sideline, screaming at him, everything like that, right? That's not leadership, right? I guess to some people, they would see it that way. Kind of, it's more accountability than it is leadership. Like, hey, man, come on, tighten up or whatever. But like, I remember hearing a story about how Shaq went into the locker room and like started basically cussing out the defense and cussing out all the players and stuff, right? And I thought to myself then, I was like, oh, we're dead. Like, that's the end of the season, because that's not leadership. Like, a visceral reaction to a painful moment is not leadership. Leadership is, hey, good, bad, and different. Let's look at what we have in front of us and how we can develop that and get better. Now, does that mean that the method of communication has to be like, softer Dave Canales or hardcore Bill Parcells? That's just a matter of opinion. But the leadership aspect of that is like, look, we have to be able to measure some fraction of what we're doing right and try to bottle that up and then build on top of that. Not, hey, man, we should have got all this done in camp and like, you guys should know what you're supposed to do. And it's like, hey, man, you're not doing it. Let me cuss you out as a result. Like, yeah, some people will respond to that, right? But by and large, a lot of it is going to be more communication. So yes, identity does matter. And right now, I think the last probably 6 games of the season, Carolina finally found its identity. What is their identity? Bryce Young.
That's it. That's Steve Wilkes came in. He said, this is what our team's going to be. Mm-hmm. And the team was not talented. It was not a very talented team. And they won games because they had a very specific thing that they were going to do. We're going to run the ball.
Yep.
We're going to have 200-yard backs.
Yep.
I mean, that's the identity of the team. It's that identity that's always been with the team. Mm-hmm. The team has always been a run first, play good defense type of team, right?
Yeah. And
now we're saying, I don't know who the quarterback is each week. I don't know if I'm going to open up the playbook for this quarterback. I'm going to say that we're going to be obsessed with the run and not run the ball. Like there's I'm not trying to hate on Canales, because I think that he's doing the best he can. He's a rookie head coach. He only was an offensive coordinator for 1 year.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give him a little bit of a break. But I think when I'm thinking keep pounding, it means all of us together, us all trying our asses off. If that's the standard for them, they ain't going to have the worst points against in league history. Like, that's just not
gonna happen. Yeah, no, I agree with you. So you did cut out there just a little bit, but it's okay. You picked up right where you needed to. I think, so you talked about the keep pounding thing, right? And we go back to, I had and this is something that I didn't really get to go in depth with Cap about, because he would have been the perfect person to ask this to. But obviously, we're going to have another conversation very soon. So, there'll be a means for me to be able to, kind of tackle this. But I have a firm belief, right? So keep pounding became a thing when the Panthers started to find success, right? So what happens with most companies once they start to define success, right? They come up with a mission statement. Now they have a vision board. They do a lot of research and development to eventually find out, okay, well, what works here? What doesn't work here, right? And if we get, I guess, the mission statement you can kind of establish early on, right? Hard work, dedication, all that kind of stuff. But eventually you have to have core beliefs. That's what you develop over time as a company. That's what separates companies who's prosper and companies who come and go, right? Is your core beliefs. Because I can take my core beliefs and all I got to do is just plug, right? If I fire a guy, I can put somebody here that's similar to that guy. It might not be the highest level of production, but our core beliefs will be able to shape him into and mold him into what we need him to be. Even if it's 10% less, the train keeps moving. So what does that mean to keep pounding? Keep pounding was formed upon specific principles. You talked about it. Power running game. All right. That's one thing. We've started to establish that again. Okay, let's go to the other side of the ball. Have we ever in our history been a 3-4 defense? The answer is no. Right? So what does that mean? If you are a 4-3 base, like I'll give you an example. In 1982, the Pittsburgh Steelers switched to a 3-4. Before that, they were a 4-3 under Chuck Noll. But they went through growing pains for years before they finally established an identity with the 3-4. Now they just go out and pick players, pluck players, and just put people in, and they always have an established defense. We had a 4-3 defense. Think about the guys that come from that. Guys like Dan Morgan. Then they fast forward to someone like John Beeson. Then they fast forward to Luke Kuechly. Luke Kuechly, while he's there, they got guys on the roster like David Mayo. They got A.J. Klein. So you have a framework by which to draft and pick players from. And really any GM can come in and look and say, okay, this is a 4-3 base. This is what was successful back then. Let's go out and draft that archetype again. And the best teams in the league just keep doing that over and over. When Tepper took over and we went to this 4-3 base defense, which is not our identity, it's taken a long time for us to try to figure it out. Because at first it was, hey, Brian Burns, let's use him as an edge, kind of wide 9 edge, or, 3-3-5, 3-3 stacks, all this kind of weird, formations that Phil Snow was doing. Then we went more to the 3-4 to cater to what he was. And he just never really fit that bill for us. And so it's like, okay, well, let's stay with that base defense, but just try and, move on to different players. And it results in the worst point differential in, the history of the league. So are we going to switch from that now? No. But what I am hoping is that Keep Pounding will now turn into, okay, well, all right, we're a 3-4 defense, but we got to find players to fit that scheme. And it's not easy to do. 3-4 outside linebackers are very tough to find that are really good. We see Abdul Carter, who's like the creme de la creme of those guys in this draft, and he's probably not going to fall to us at 8.
No,
know? So, sorry, go ahead. To build on top of what I just mentioned there. My apologies.
Oh, absolutely. But what I hate about what we're doing is the players know that they have built-in excuses. The coaches know that they have built-in excuses because the fan base doesn't hold them to a standard. And that's what is killing me about this team, is that they get to go in front of the media and go on social media, and we choose to keep giving them outs. Yeah, we were really hurt. You know who else was really hurt? Everyone. The Detroit Lions were the most injured team in the league, and they had the 12th best defense in the league. They lost Hutchinson, all their linebackers, Davenport. They lost the Raiders lost Wilkins. They lost Crosby. They lost their whole defense. That ain't an excuse.
Right.
To be the worst ever, like we gotta remember this is like 80 years of data that we have on this. And you're the worst ever. And no one talks about it. No one's saying you start the year. Everybody was healthy at the start of the year. You gave up 47 points. You end the year, the last 3 games of the year, you gave up 38.7 points as an average.
Yeah.
How you're not getting any better, and there should be a standard of at least get better, at least try. Because if you try, you're not the worst. There's nobody we're all NFL players, even though they're practice squad guys. If you're trying, you're definitely not going to be the worst. And that's what I'm kind of leading into, is that we need to get the Bill Belichick mentality, do your job, and everybody does a job, and not just say, well, if I don't do my job, then, nothing's going to happen. I'm going to be fine. Like that's kind of like how we're treating this as a company. And that's kind of how I feel. And that's when you have Sam Mills that comes up and says, I have cancer, and but I decided I could either give up or keep pounding. That's kind of where keep pounding comes from. Yeah. Don't be Sam Mills. Don't be, well, we're injured. We had all these injuries. So, boo.
Yeah. See, so it's interesting you say that, because I asked Cap that same question. And I'm sure I'll reference him quite a few times, because, having that lived experience is different. Because he's seen both sides of it. He saw success in 2012, 13, and he saw absolute failure in 09 and 10, well, not 10, because that was the Cam year. Well, no, actually, 10. Yeah, it was 2009, 2010. He was there 2 years before they drafted Cam. But so I asked him the same question. I'm like, hey, man, this Avero thing, I'm torn. This is the one subject for me that I am what my detractors, because I do have a few, would call a flip flopper, right? They'd be like, oh man, you're flipping, flip flopping back and forth, right? But this is tough, man. It really is, because on one hand, you look at Avero and you're like, hey man, this guy was a hot name. His defense, we knew that it wasn't going to be super aggressive coming in, And he did have a top 5 statistical defense last year, even though it didn't look like that at times. I mean, you just have to, call a spade a spade. But like, also, man, can you not like coach some of these guys up? And Cap's point is just like, look, man, for as much as we understand, like, yes, the practice squad guy is probably going to be Mr. Football in your city, right? But the correlation is the same. The guy that you knew in high school that played football, that his jersey was always clean, in the NFL, it's very similar. It's because he's just not that good, And so I guess to me, there were times where these guys, I mean, they played their hearts out, man. They played about as good a clean game as they could against Philly. You know what I'm saying? To hold them to what they held them to for us to have.
That was the best game they played all year.
Yeah,
in my opinion, as far as the defense.
So, and it's I think sometimes like personnel, some guys get preferential treatment based on what they were signed to. Like for example, I felt like Damani Richardson played better than Fuller, but Damani didn't really get a lot of opportunity because he was a late round. I don't even think he was drafted. I think he was undrafted, right? Mm-hmm. And Fuller was a guy you brought in free agency and you paid, and he's had success in this league before, right? But I watched
starting safety on a Super Bowl team.
Exactly. On the Super Bowl team, and it's weird because he comes here and I watched him get like absolutely torched game 1 against the Saints, really off of more of a miscommunication than it was just an athletic ability. So that's where the questions start to come in, like, okay, are these guys being coached up properly? Because if you're firing all these position coaches, but the DC is over them, like, yeah, I mean, that raises, and it's fair. It raises serious, fair questions. Someone like Dunk is dying on the hill, man. Evero's not it, right? And I can't blame him for that. I can't blame anybody who takes that position. I kind of fall somewhere in the middle. On one hand, I'm like, hey, man, if Robert Saleh was there, maybe you give him a call. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. He said, you know what? I'm not doing it. So that's why they went back with Evero. On the other hand, it's like, what happens next year if there ever was a draft, Alex, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a little bit, to draft players for a 3-4 base defense, it is this draft, if there ever was one. So, I mean, I guess you just kind of, you give him a shot to see what he has. I don't think he lasts halfway through the season if it looks anything remotely close to what we saw this year, man. But I don't think it will because, I mean, you get Shaq back healthy. I think he's going to, retire a Panther. You get Derek back and, whatever you draft, whoever you bring in free agency, it can't be this bad again going into
right.
It just can't be.
Right. Yeah. So it's got to be somebody's fault. It can't just be nobody's fault, right? Mm-hmm. You can't say, hey, well, he didn't have the right guys. Well, then Dan Morgan's got to go. Like, get him the right guys. Oh, we didn't spend enough money in free agency. Well, yes, you did. You got Clowney coming back. He's basically he's just all dead cap basically. Yeah, Clowney got him coming back. You got Waddle coming back. You got Josie Jewell coming back. You got Dane Jackson coming back. They're all guys that have dead cap this year. Shy Tuttle, everybody wants him gone. He's got dead cap next year. Mm-hmm. So A'Shawn Robinson's dead cap next year. So all these guys that you brought in that you spent money on are still going to be here next year. Yeah. So if it's not like we can completely upgrade this defense, and everybody, the narrative is that we took care of the offense last year. We're going to take care of the defense this year. One, you can do both in the same year. Mm-hmm. Just saying. They signed 4 guys last year on offense in the first month. They got 3 offensive linemen and David Moore. Yeah. I mean it's just asinine that we keep on excusing these things. So if you're saying that he didn't have the players, then Morgan's Fitter wasn't good. This is his right hand man. Then you say his first year he didn't bring good enough players in. I mean, Jim, I'm just thinking logically. Like I don't mind keeping these guys, but I'm just saying that somebody's got to be held accountable at some point. Mm-hmm. And if Morgan's going to even fall on the sword and said I didn't give him good enough players, well, man, you had in my opinion, you had a 1-year tryout because you were on that Fitterer staff, and you said, hey, man, no, I can do better than what Fitterer did. And then you get worse, as in the worst defense of all time. I don't know, man.
You're not wrong. However, this was my strongest point, and this is probably where I'm going to stake my claim and moving forward. this is where people would say I'm flip flopping, because I did make a video. I did make a video about calling Robert Saleh, but I've also said from the very beginning that he would be the only person that I would call, the only one. I would not make a change if it's not him. Right. With that being said, I think at some point you got to stop the hemorrhaging. What is the hemorrhaging? No successful organization that exists will exist when you constantly have turnover at your most important positions, like every single year, right?
Correct.
So if it's a GM this year, he's going to have a different philosophy. It's going to be bad for Bryce. It's going to be bad for. So yeah, I agree with you. I do think someone has to take the blame. I think that I hate to say scapegoat, but if we're going to use that word, their scapegoat was, the position coaches.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Now this year, but here's what I also don't want to see, Alex. I don't want to see an overcorrection. I think overcorrections are just as dangerous. What's an overcorrection look like? I'll tell you. Derek Brown. What's my man's name from Penn State that we drafted? Oh gosh.
Linebacker?
Defensive end. YGM. Derek Brown.
Oh, yeah.
YGM, Jeremy Chin, Troy Pride, Stanley Thomas Oliver, Kenny Anderson, Keith Taylor, who else? Bravion Roy. Oh, no, not DJ Johnson. He was the next year. But the point is,
you're talking about draft. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, those players I just mentioned, of all those guys, the only one left. There's two guys left from that draft: Sam Franklin and Derek. Sam wasn't drafted, right? So Derek was the only draft pick in that 2020 draft where we went all defense that's left. That's an overcorrection, right? So this whole draft situation coming up, yeah, man, if I'm at pick 8, and it depends on who's there, man. I'm all over the board with that. You know what? I know that's not a topic that we're at right now, but let's just talk about, we don't have to go deep diving in the draft. But let's just talk about that 8th pick. Where do you stand as far as like what you feel like the biggest need is for us at pick 8 right there?
So it's kind of a little nuanced because what we do in free agency, because I think there is not a shot in hell we're getting T. Higgins, Garrett Wilson. We're not getting any of those guys. We're not getting Chris Godwin. Like, we just don't get those guys. And I did a video about this. The only 2 free agents that I can even think of that were starting receivers for the Panthers that we got in free agency were Adam Thielen and DJ Chark. Like, if you go back and think about it, Devin Funchess, Kelvin Benjamin, DJ Moore, we traded for Robbie Anderson. We traded for Deontay Johnson. We just don't get these guys in free agency. And I think Garrett Wilson's off the table, and just in my opinion, because the worst thing you can do as a GM is come in and trade your young, amazing receiver. So because of that, I think that we should go receiver, especially if Tet's there. Because we can't expect year 3 Bryce, when this is our evaluation year, basically. It's always the evaluation year for your quarterback. Yeah. It's our evaluation year, and we don't have another tight end on the roster right now except for Sanders. And then you're talking about a second-year Coker and a second-year Xavier Legette. Both aren't high-volume receivers, or they haven't shown to be high-volume receivers in the past. And then Adam Thielen, if I'm him, I'm retired. Like, I just don't know why you don't retire. He missed half the season. You got to expect that he's going to keep on missing half seasons because he's 35 years old. Yeah. So outside of that, David Moore, like, you're not getting these guys, and you're not getting these guys in free agency. Like, your best hope is maybe Elijah Moore. And you suck at drafting receivers second round and later. You're just terrible. You're terrible at it. Get the home run pick. Take Tet. Also, because this free agency class, also the defensive line draft is super, super deep. And I think that we could trade up. If we have 9 picks, we should trade up into earlier in the first round, second round.
100%.
And we can find a solid defensive lineman. But I think you got to nail – you can't properly evaluate Bryce unless you give him a true wide receiver 1, and we ain't going to get it in free agency, so I'm getting it there. And in your free agency class, there's a ton of good linebackers, a ton of good pass rushers, and a ton of good safeties, and I think those are our other 3 big needs.
That's interesting. So you kind of answered the question that I thought that, most people would say, oh, it's got to be defense. And I don't necessarily disagree with those people. It just depends on who, defensively, because
Correct.
now personally, so I'm doing a mock. I'm not going to give away too much because I am doing a mock tomorrow, and I got questions about why one specific player has been just completely overlooked. But let's just say hypothetically they decide that, like I wouldn't be opposed if Tet's off the board. I'm not opposed to Starks. Now, I think that there's a safety out of South Carolina that I really like, Nick Eminori, I think is how you say his name.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Really, he has that. He's that Cam Chancellor prototype, 6'3", big, physical, like has a nose for the ball. Like his ball skills are insane. I like Lathan Ransom out of Ohio State. So there's some guys out there, but Starks is like the creme de la creme of the bunch. And I do think that a safety on this team could change things drastically as far as like your secondary, even some of the the run defense. When these guys break containment. And I've seen some teams before. I mean, shoot, when Pete Carroll took over at Seattle many years ago, his first overall pick, or not first overall, but his first round pick that year, after them going 7 times was Earl. Yeah. And so, and even in the Troy Polamalu year. The year prior, man, their defensive ends, or their outside linebackers, because they were a 3-4. Man, the most sacks that any of them had was like 6, total. So I mean, you could have made an argument even then, like, hey, we need a certified pass rusher. But they found James Harrison, kind of in free agency or after the draft or whatever, and signed him and developed him, and the rest was history. But I'm like you. I think if Tet's there, it's really tough to pass on somebody who, I know that there's a concern about his, like, it's really more of his deep separation, but you could say scheme is related, there's a few things, but what he does, running a drag, his comeback routes at that size, man, if you can develop that part of him out there where he can be, like a deep ball threat, he'll be an X coming into the league. Like,
correct.
Right away,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you develop that part of his game, he goes from being, I think some of his comps right now, people are saying like, man, who did I hear? I've heard people say Alshon Jeffrey. I've heard people say,
I've heard Mike Evans,
AJ. Well, see, that's what I was going to say. If he takes that step as a deep route, because I mean, here's the thing, man. That offense that he plays in, this is why you don't know what he can be as far as that's concerned, right? Because they didn't have a Johnny Manziel. You see what I'm saying? Like a lot of the Johnny Manziel stuff, man, and what made Mike Evans so great coming out of college was just that playground. Like Johnny's back there running around, and Mike's out there one-on-one with a safety that's half his size, right? And so he just kind of lob it up to him. Their offense was very much more formulaic, where like, if he's going deep, he's going against, single high safety, and it's a one-on-one opportunity, but it's more, what would I say? More structured, right? So when you have a quarterback that can play out of structure like a Bryce Young, I mean, that could make Tet, man, even better than we even realize he is, man.
Man, there ain't a lot of guys I fall in love with in the draft. His ball skills, you can't teach some of this stuff.
Right.
Like, I think that he's fantastic. I don't think he's dropping an A. Me personally,
I don't see how the Patriots pass on him. Yeah,
I don't see how the Raiders pass on him. I think PFF has him as a highest graded player in the draft. So we ain't getting Abdul Carter. In my opinion, he's the best player in the draft. You're not going to get Tet, I don't think. And Mason Graham would be the other person that I would want. I just don't think he's going to be great immediately, and I think we need immediate impact, especially in that area.
Man, okay. So now I'm gonna do it anyway, man. I don't care about I'm a double dip. Hey, man, listen. All right. I love what I saw from Abdul Carter this year. I'm not taking anything away from him, man, at all. But I do believe that we're overlooking somebody, right?
Pierce?
Yes. We are overlooking James Pierce.
Yep.
Buddy, last year, and I looked this up on PFF, their stats were so eerily similar, it's ridiculous, right? This was Abdul's first year as an edge, right? He played off-ball linebacker the other 2 years at Penn State, right? if you were to look at James Pierce's stats from last year, there is no man when he going into this season, and I know that always changes. They had, people had Carson Beck mocked to us first overall because of Bryce Young struggles, right? First overall pick or whatever. But if you go back and look at James Pierce's last season, many people came into this season thinking that he might be the number 1 overall pick, right? He had a down year, not an off year. He was still a disruptor, still a wrecking ball. And I know many people are like, man, but his size, man, he looks like Burns. It's kind of that Burns. This guy is not Burns, Alex. He is not Brian. Excuse me. Brian Burns is not James Pierce. I should say that, right? He is not. Not even close. I'm thinking like, man, this kid may shoot up the boards once the Senior Bowl happens. If he's there, I'm not sure if he goes.
I doubt he goes.
Okay, but there's a chance. Combine, all this kind of stuff. Once these measurements starts to come out, that just because I've seen some up. Jack Sawyer has flown up the boards, right? You talked about it. Tet has flown up the boards even more. I wouldn't undervalue
Jalen Walker.
Jalen Walker, Michael Williams, or Mikael Williams. I wouldn't disregard the fact that they may be looking at Pierce like, man, and really, and I know I hate to say this based on, who I would say is maybe his biggest advocate, but Evero may be looking at him like, look, man, if we get this kid within 2 years, he might be the best pass rusher in the league. Like, he may be ridiculous. So I don't know. What's your thoughts on Pierce?
So I'm with you. he's number 2 in the class for me.
Okay.
And because I'm so sold on wide receiver, I don't think that there's a world, because even if we don't get him, I'm looking at Guka. I don't think we should get Burden, because Burden, like you said, with Xavier Legette, play 1 year. We can't expect these guys to be high volume receivers if they only play 1 year in the NCAA. But if we don't go wide receiver, say we get Garrett Wilson, say we go the Elijah Moore route or Godwin or whatever, right? Say we get that in free agency. Edge is 1,000% where we should go, because these guys can be good right away. Yeah. Defensive tackle almost always takes time. You don't get Jalen Carter's every day. And that's like the only person I can think of that was elite immediately as far as the interior line, defensive line. So you got to go edge if you go the wide receiver 1 in free agency. I don't want to see Malachi Starks. I said that it was going to be Malachi. He was my first pick at 8 before I saw that we were never going to get these wide receiver 1s in free agency. But I don't want them. I'm looking at guys like Javon Holland that we could get. Justin Reed has a connection with Tillis. Trufanda from San Francisco. There's a lot of good safeties in this free agency. I
can't believe they didn't re-sign him. I like to know.
They don't have any money.
Right.
So like we can get a lot of these guys. Same with pass rusher. You got Kuntz from the Raiders, who had a knee injury, missed the whole year last year. He's going to go somewhere on a 1 year cheap deal, prove-it deal. They got the Browning from Denver to Seattle, who was in Avero's system. So there's so many guys we can get to fill those needs. There ain't a lot of wide receiver 1s, so that's why I'm stuck on getting a wide receiver 1. But if we don't, edge is certainly the way I would go. And if Carter's not there, Pierce 1,000,000,000%.
I'm with you there, and just to further your point about free agency, because that kind of covers one of our next topics: what's realistic in free agency. My first, before I do anything else, right? Just like this is why I am believing in Canales' belief and Dan Morgan's belief in Ejiro Evero, right? And why I can get on board with it, because they identified that a smaller quarterback and really the running game, the trenches have to be the main priority. Right? We have to have guards. Like, I wouldn't be surprised to see them drafting guards in the 3rd round this year. Wouldn't be surprised at all.
Of course. Yeah.
To keep guys in rotation. Yeah.
You're losing so many guys.
Yes.
Christensen, Mays. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. my first order of priority before I sign anybody else even before I would sign Garrett Wilson, I got to find a nose. Shy Tuttle is not a nose tackle. And it's laughable that they even put him out there to be one, right? I have got to find a nose. There's a guy from who is it? Hargraves? Is it from San Francisco? That's available. Yeah, I'm looking at him. Somebody's filling that spot. Yeah,
I mean, I wrote down the kid from Detroit, Onward Zerke, I guess his name is Levi Onward Zerke. I like him to fill that role. I think that the most likely and the best that we could do, because I'm thinking about Cap, I'm thinking about what Panthers usually get. They usually don't get these high level guys. Hargraves ain't coming here. Like, I'm so sorry to tell you. Like, he just ain't. But somebody like BJ Hill. BJ Hill would be fantastic, I think. And he's older. I hate he's injury prone. It sucks. But that's who we can get. Him, the guy from Detroit. A lot of people are on this kid from Dallas, Osa.
Ozawinki. Yeah, I know you're talking about.
Yeah, but I think that he's more of what Brown is, like sort of like.
He put more in. Yeah.
So those guys would probably be more realistic for the Panthers. But sure, like if somebody was to come, I'm down. Like I'm down. One of these elite guys. But I actually think that safety is the number one. We don't have one. Like there's no safety.
See, I would have thought that, but and Cap kind of confirmed this for me. He's like, man, in that 3-4, like think back about when we first moved to the 3-4 base defense. It was like 2019 or something like that, right? And Luke Kuechly went from being one of the best middle linebackers in the league to an off-ball, linebacker in a 4-2-5 mainly, right? Other than when we ran a true 3-4. And there were some games where he looked pedestrian just because he was getting mauled by guards, all kind of stuff. And that's what Cap was saying. He's like, man, if you're going to run this 3-4 defense, you got to have some beasts up front. Terrence Rose Knighton, Vince Wilfork. Like, you got to have an absolute monster as your nose tackle. Vita Vea, right? Kind of guy. Now, there's nobody like that in this draft necessarily. There's some big dudes. Now, don't get me wrong. There's some guys that you could possibly develop. I don't know that I would necessarily say that Alfred Collins is a nose tackle, but I feel like he's a little bit taller than that. And I don't necessarily, even if Mason Graham fell to us, I feel like he would be the other defensive end. I don't think he's a nose tackle in a 3-4. He would be a really, really good pairing with Derek Brown as that, the left and right defensive end. But yeah, you got to have a beast in there, man. So like, I don't even know that it has to be someone like super great, like you talked about. None of the, really great players would likely come here. I just think it has to be better and more formidable than what we have. Yeah. But yes, I do think I would say that the two most important positions would definitely be nose tackle and safety. Have to be on defense. Yeah.
Yeah. So to your point, when I said most important, I mean the one we should spend the most money on.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so I think BJ Hill you can probably get on like a $3-4 million deal, but I think that he would suffice. Especially, I mean, look at this. You got right now you have Derek Brown, who next year has the third most dead cap. You have Shy Tuttle, who has the 8th most dead cap, and A'Shawn Robinson, who has the 10th most dead cap on the team. We're spending money on that interior O line, we're spending money on that interior D line. So I don't think you can spend a ton of money there. So like you said, I think it's bringing somebody in that's just a big body. But yeah, I'm doing anything I can to get Javon Holland. Like that's my target. I go Robert Hunt. Go call your buddy in Miami. Tell this dude to get here. We'll give him whatever he wants.
Yeah.
And then the other one that I want is Drew Dalman from Atlanta at center, because we got to get a center. Honestly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Now, so you don't think that it's realistic? Because I do think that they're gonna shoot their shot regardless. But you don't see like what they did against Atlanta. What Bryce did against Atlanta. I think that personally that helps their case for someone like T. Higgins to say like, "Hey, man, I'll go there because I would be a king there if we start turning this thing around." You don't think that helps at all?
I just historically no. Like it didn't work with Cam. Cam was here, he couldn't get anybody to come. Cam was winning MVP, he couldn't get anybody to come. He was throwing to to Ted Ginn, Kotchery, and Philly Brown. Like that's like we just never have been able to do it. So we've always had to draft our own, and we've been freaking terrible at it. I just think that T, if anybody would, it would be T, because he's from the area and he isn't a big personality. Like he doesn't need to be on prime time. He doesn't need to be in front of the media. So there is a case for him, but he'd be the first big name wide receiver to ever come to Carolina on his own. So it's me weighing the likelihood as historical data wise versus what my fandom opinion and the excitement of playing with Bryce Young would be. I just think because he's looking at everything else, he's like, oh yeah, but we're not going to win because you got a terrible defense. Kind of, is it going to be stable? You have 7 coaches in 6 years. You have a revolving door at quarterback. I want to come to a stable organization with a stable ownership group. I think we're just going to have to prove that we're a stable organization before big time free agents, as far as not premium positions, but skill players. I think before they start coming here.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, all right. So moving right along. So I want to go here first because the last topic I feel like is going to be, it could be a deep dive. So you asked, is it possible for us to be a playoff team? My question is yes, but I'm going to let you answer first before I dive into this. Do you think that the 2025 season could potentially be our first playoff berth since 2017?
It's going to surprise people, but yes, I think we win the division next year. I think that Tampa, yes, they lost Chris Godwin for the year, but in general, they didn't have bad injuries this year. That's going to regress to the mean. I think they're going to get more injured. They're also going to get the number one schedule that they're playing. I don't know if you've seen our schedule for next year. It ain't bad at all. And then the Falcons are just going to Falcon. They were fully healthy this year. I don't think they lost one guy this year. And they're an 8-win team. That's just who they are. They're like, that's what that team is. They spent way too much money last year. They made the worst move that I've seen in forever in signing Kirk Cousins and then drafting Penix and then benching Kirk Cousins like 2 games before a potential playoff. You think if Kirk Cousins plays against us? I know Michael Penix had a big game, but I think Kirk Cousins could win that game against the Commanders and could win against us. So that was a weird move. I think that's just who they are. They've been really healthy with London and Bijan. I'm not wishing injuries on anybody, but that's too many skilled players to not miss time. And then the Saints are the Saints. So I think that we could do kind of what the Jags did their second year with Trevor and go 9-8, win the division, potentially win the playoff game, but not because we are a playoff caliber team compared to the rest of the NFC. I think it's because that we are the best in a bad division.
I agree. I'm not going to jump out the window. My last year record prediction was I said we could go 6-11, 7-10. We actually
I said 8-9.
Okay, so still close. Here's what I think can realistically happen. I think that Derek Brown comes back. Let's just say everything happens in succession. Derek Brown comes back. That's 103 tackles that's coming back on the field, right? They draft their edge of the future. Shaq comes back for a healthy year. I know that, who knows if he would stay healthy? Who knows if he'll even be here? But
it's a voided contract. I think you void that contract.
Yeah.
It's like $5 million. He's a minimum player right now.
Right. So offensively, I think that Carolina is going to be one of the top 7 offenses in the league next year.
Yep. I can see that.
I think Bryce is going to turn a corner and we're going to see the closest version of him in Alabama or better. And I would venture to say better. I think Bryce is going to turn a corner to be he'll be in MVP conversation next year, because if the season would have gone better, if they beat Philly, if they beat Kansas City, right? Now you're
Tampa
talking
Bay.
about that's an 8-9 team, and then you split with Tampa. You're in the race for the division, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, and they look, the Tampa win that could have been a win, right?
Easily.
Easily.
Bubbles. Yeah.
Yeah.
Eddie Pinheiro.
Yeah. So when I couple all that together, I think the biggest thing was going to be, is Bryce going to fall off a cliff, right? And I believe the answer is an emphatic no. I think everything that we saw going into the end of the season is who Bryce has been all along, because people, if they want to, talk real and not just in their feelings, we saw this last year. He was doing this last year, man. Even in that, amidst all that turmoil, there were flashes of the very stuff that you're seeing this year. Man, that throw that he made, like, I'm going to tell you really when I knew, like, oh my gosh, like, he made a throw and we went up 14-0 on Miami, right? And then they just started like pummeling us, right?
Yeah.
But he made a throw under pressure to Adam Thielen with anticipation, where like I don't even know if he could really see where he was throwing the ball, but he knew exactly where it needed to go. That if
left corner? Was it the left corner?
Right corner. So he's getting blitzed right in his face, throws the ball. Adam's running basically probably like a in, or you would say, no, I would say more of a drag, right? Thielen's running a drag. If he had more speed, he's taking off. He's going to the house.
Yeah.
When I saw that, I'm like, oh my gosh, this kid is going to be. And then this year, there was 2 throws, right? One I made a video about, the throw that he made to Xavier Legette in the Saints game on 3rd and 10, right, to convert. And then the throw he made when he first came back against Denver, that throw that he made to Coker on the sideline between 2 defenders. I'll be honest with you, man, Alex, I've not seen that a lot in the league. And there's some really, really good court. Like, you don't see that a lot, man. And like, for example, I was watching and I know this will come out after the game that's on right now, but I was watching the Philly game just a moment ago, and Tom Brady was talking about this, and I was like, and I immediately thought of Bryce Young, and I was like, oh man, Bryce is going to be so good, because AJ Brown had a one-on-one opportunity. They went single high safety. It was him and what's the corner that they brought in? The Lattimore, right? Yeah, Marshawn Lattimore. So he had his one-on-one opportunity, and AJ kind of had the leverage. So if you throw it towards the back pylon, now you got him. It's those 2 guys, dog fighting it out. Yep. And like, Tom's like, man, they don't build plays in the NFL for you to hold the ball for 3 seconds, Jalen Hurts. You got to let that thing go, right? I've seen Bryce do that this year. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it's David Moore in the corner of the end zone and he drops it, but at least he's taking those shots. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that offensively, we're going to be a top 7 offense. I'm saying that on record. Defensively is really going to be the question. So, yes, I do believe that we can go to the playoffs next year and win the division. I'm like you. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, look what people don't remember how amazing Kyler was his first year, because they won like 5 games because their defense was atrocious. Yeah. And then the next year they got DeAndre Hopkins, and man, Kyler was right there, man. He was in the MVP, and I think that could be a lot of the same sort of way that Bryce's arc goes, I guess. Get him a number 1 and watch him work, man. Like, because if he can just have a guy with everything breaks down, can just catch the ball, he should go one-on-one and catch the ball for you, or like just a red zone threat in general. Watch out. And then year 2 of Sanders, Legette, and Coker. Yeah, but I still think the defense is going to be bad. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I think it'll be a little bit better. I don't think it'll be good enough, though. Yeah, I agree with you. It's going to be bad, but it'll start to be marginally better. I was talking to Cap about the 15 season for us was such an amazing season. The Saints had, at that time, they had posted one of the worst defenses in history. Rob Ryan, was coaching, and then they turned it around within a 2-year period, and they drafted guys like Lattimore. They drafted, they brought back Malcolm Jenkins, so it can turn around. And I mean, look, we see historically, man, gosh, the St. Louis Rams were 4-12 before they found Kurt Warner and was the greatest show on turf.
They were 4-12 before McVay came in. And McVay changed it. Yeah.
So, it can happen seemingly overnight, but the most important position you got to get right, you finally found, And so to me, that means more than really anything else, because now we're finally going into an off season. Like, I love how quiet it is right now for content purpose. Obviously
I'm not
being
quiet
is right. Yeah. But I do love that it's quiet in terms of like, we're not like scrambling to find out who's going to be behind center next year. Like, we have that guy now. Right.
So you're saying that it can turn around overnight, and it doesn't need to take, multiple years. We could be the Commanders. And honestly, I think Commanders are a very good comp, because Commanders defense, atrocious to start the year.
Yeah.
But Dan Quinn got those guys coached up to being pretty good by the end of the season. They lost their defensive tackle or defensive end tackle, I guess.
Deron Payne. Yeah.
And then Deron Payne just got hurt, so they lost him too. And they lost. They traded Forbes. They traded Dotson. They traded Montez Sweat, Chase Young, like all these first round picks that they had built up, and everybody says, "Oh, they spent a long time getting their core."
Yeah.
No, they did not. They traded all these guys away. They have 2 guys left from there, and that's Payne and Allen, and both got hurt this year.
That's a good one. I didn't think about that. Yeah, that's a great one.
They're in the NFC Championship game.
Right.
Because their defense got coached up. I still have hope for Everoak, and I said this in previous pods. I'm not killing the guy. I don't want to fire him. I just think that we should understand what we're talking about and not create false narratives of, you need this forever long time to rebuild, when Jalen Daniels is passing to Zacchaeus, old guy Ertz, who we could have had.
Yeah.
Austin Eckler, who we could have had. It's so if the GM does the right thing and the coaches do the right thing, you can win with guys in the NFL. It's a 500 league.
Yeah. Yeah. You gotta make a lot of the right moves. You would hope that they, you keep talking about I think equally as, let's just say hypothetically, Tet's off the board. I think what's equally as important, would I like to have an ex like Ted? Of course, right? But I think you need perimeter, and really even you just need somebody that's a game breaker, right? Like, we don't really have a lot of game breaking guys on this team, somebody that you have to account for. So I'll throw this last name out there. It's either one of 2 of these names. And ironically, he just happens to be a lot of clips keep coming out. If I would have put my mock draft out the week before, then I would have looked like a genius because of talking about this kid. But man, I would really keep my eyes on LeJohntay Murray from Colorado. This kid, man, what I saw today from the clips coming out of the Shrine Bowl, very AB kind of separator.
Yes. You posted something on Twitter about this, right?
Well, I posted another content creator, What's Up Doug, is at the Shrine Bowl. And I saw clips of him, taking clips of LeJohntay Murray. And either him. Now, I would much rather, I'd say him over Jimmy Horn on the same team, because I feel like those guys were really looked over due to the fact that most of your passes are being forced to Travis Hunter, just because of how amazing he was as a receiver.
Right.
But yeah, I'm not so sure that these guys might not, I could see Horn becoming his own version of a Tank Dell or Downs. LeJohntay, I'm telling you, man, he's got some A/B kind of route running and separating skills or whatever, man. And he's always open. You watch that Colorado tape, and even when they weren't necessarily looking his direction, he was always available. So, and he's going to go in later rounds. He's not going to be, I think he could probably jump up a little bit, but right now, if you were to do a mock on PFF, he's down there in the, 6th, 7th round or whatever. So I think he'll be available. I think the guy from one of the guys that I think is going to jump up like crazy is a guy who was kind of robbed of the Biletnikoff, and that's the Nick Nash guy from San Diego State. Yeah. He's another one. That's one of those, you got to be accountable for him. He could be an X, or he could be insane slot, or maybe even a Z, but it just depends on the scheme. But
it's always the small school guys, man. Small school guys.
It is. That's right.
like we just saw with Coker, Holy Cross. Like, I'm don't sleep on the small school guys.
Yeah,
they're always the ones that break out
at all. So
Zay Jones with East Carolina.
Yeah, that's right.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So last topic, you said, does Bryce's POV, point of view of Canales change? I want to hear, I'm going to give you the floor. Tell me whatever you want to tell me in regards to that, because I've got a lot of commentary on this one. So floor is yours.
It's so hard because Bryce has already exceeded my expectations. I can't, a guy so selfless, humble, mentally tough. Every time this happens to a quarterback, he kills him. It just does. Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, Sam Darnold forever was like that. Keep going. Geno Smith, Kenny Pickett. All these guys they come back in and they just their confidence is shot. They see ghosts. They don't think that the team supports them. So Bryce already has exceeded my expectations for any human being that exists in the world, because I'd be like that.
Right.
Like I talk about Brian Burns all the time. When you don't pay him after he gets 2 Pro Bowls in a row, and you keep on saying that, oh yeah, we got you, and you're not actually worth this to us. And I know you hit your goals 2 years in a row, but you don't get a raise,
right?
Like that kind of stuff. So, and then Brian Burns is like the last season he was here, he basically said, I
mailed it in.
He did. So it's every single player or person has this about them, because we're humans. We have feelings, right? Bryce seems like he's so locked in during the season. He doesn't think about it. He has his teammates and he has his dad, right? Kind of in his ear. So he can concentrate on that. In the off season, if what David Newton was saying is true, and that people close to Bryce think that they don't support him, or they've moved on from him, or they don't like him, and that's who you're around all off season, and you just sit there and you think and you rest and you start hearing reports, looking at reports, talking to your the old baggage lady at the 7-Eleven, and you can keep on hearing that over and over and over and over and over again. At some point in time, you're going to reflect and be like, wow, 2 games. And then when I was benched after 2 games, is because I lost to I had 86 yards versus the Chargers. Andy Dalton was still the quarterback after he had 93 yards against the Commanders, threw a pick 6, got just beaten down by the Commanders defense, who didn't have Jonathan Allen, who traded Montez Sweat, who traded Chase Young. Like that's the team that kept you to 7 points and under 100 yards passing and had a pick 6 against you, quarterbacked by Marcus Mariota. And that wasn't enough to bench him. So you're Bryce Young and you're sitting there like, wow, and I had to do all of this? Can I repeat that? Like, it's just a normal human. There's a human element that has to be in every human being.
Yeah.
So I have to think that it's going to change. And I have to think that he's going to go back and watch all those post-game interviews and going to see that he never got a game ball and going to see like all these things that should be given to someone who's had that much success and who's carried a team like that. That's just my point of view. I don't have like an actual stern answer, because Bryce Young is different. He just is. So he might not, but he'd be like no other human being that exists in the world if that was the case.
That was a lot. I'll ask this before you. Okay, so what is your conclusion as far as like what's your conclusion on Bryce's point of view of Canales as a result of everything that you just mentioned?
I think that when you make calls like this and you are a leader of men, all men, and it ain't just Bryce that's going to be hearing this. It's Excel and his family and his friends. It's Coker and his family, his friends. It's every single person that's on that offense that named Bryce Young captain. They voted Bryce Young as captain, and they're going to hear that from all their people. And they're all going to have this new opinion about Dave Canales, in my opinion. Because like I said, you don't think about that when you're in it because you're focused on the next game. You got to live with the consequences of your decisions. If you're Dave Canales, I think personally it's going to cause a little bit of disrespect towards Dave Canales in the locker room, and it's not going to be huge, but it's just that first little step of not listening to him or not thinking that he has their back or not being able to come. I did a whole podcast when Canales got hired. I was like, I love that he wrote this book. I love that he's telling about how he was unfaithful. Because it makes him relatable, it takes him off a pedestal, and it helps people come to him when they have problems and not afraid to know that he is human too, and he's like if you're going through something mentally, he'll help you through that for the betterment of the team. That's starting to wane a little bit for me if I'm thinking as the rest of the guys going home to their families in the offseason and hearing all that chatter. So for me, I think that is slight. But I think Dave Canales will have lost the locker room for a little bit of the locker room, which I think the chain will eventually make him. This is going way too deep. Make him Doug Peterson. I don't know if you listened to my last podcast. There's only been two rookie head coaches in the past 6 years that have not been to the playoffs their first season and still have jobs. There's only been two, and that's Zach Taylor, who lost Joe Burrow. And went to the Super Bowl the next year, and Dan Campbell. All other rookie head coaches who don't make the playoffs their first season, they're gone, and they're gone within 4 years. And it's the Doug Peterson thing where you have success, but then it just starts to wane a little bit. And I see the first little bit of that happening right now.
I think so. To your Zach Taylor point, I know that, and this is one of those things that it's just, you catch lightning in a bottle, because didn't they hire him the previous year? They go 2-14 and they end up with Burrow. No,
they got Burrow and Taylor in the same year.
Did they? Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Man, who did they have on that?
Marvin Lewis. Marvin Lewis was there for 16 years before that.
Wow. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So to answer your last point before I go into anything else, I think that Dave Canales has afforded himself minimum 3 years, even if next year is like a 7-win season.
Agreed. Yeah.
Because of all of the past, stuff that's gone on with, Tepper and all this, how this is all played out. Right.
Yep.
To the Bryce point, though, I personally took exception to the fact that he never received a game ball throughout the entire season. I took exception, like, okay, even if you have, you talked about him writing the book, right? Sometimes when we recognize our wrongs, we will, do everything that we can to try to, show our forgiveness or show our, repentance for that or whatever, that looks like. But then there's times where if you show the repentant heart on one side, another side might not feel that way, right? So let's just say, for example, that Bryce Young was maybe a little bit of a diva when Dave Canales first came in. Hey, man, I was picked number 1 overall. This whole situation's a mess. Coaches getting fired, all this other kind of stuff. I'm not really believing what you're saying. I got the situation going on with my girlfriend, whatever the case is, right? And maybe Dave can't really get through to him. Now, do I believe that this is the case? No, I do not. But maybe Dave can't get through to him. Well, Dave puts him on the bench because he struggles. And then he starts to learn the error of his ways. The last thing that you would want to do is continue to treat him as if he's some kind of cast off, or if he's like a prodigal, or whatever, right? You would want to embrace him and say, hey, man, you're learning from what I taught you. And if you're going to do that privately, then you should say that publicly as well, because my problem is hey, man, you didn't have a problem benching him publicly. You didn't have a problem talking about his struggles publicly, but you have a problem when this kid starts playing out of his mind and bailing you out of a lot of situations. Let's just keep it real. Man, when Bryce, me and Dunk talked about this, and I clipped this part and made a separate video, and this video done better than the whole interview that we did together, right? The long form video. I said, man, listen, when Bryce was walking to the sideline against the Saints after we just went swing pass to Miles, screen pass, run, 3 and out really quick, he's walking to the sideline like, man, what are we doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, you could tell there was visible frustration. And I don't blame him, because he's like, man, if you're not going to trust me, why am I out here?
Right.
Make no mistake about it. When Smitty was sitting down with the guy from NFL Network on his podcast, and he said, man, there were teams, the NFL guy, I think it might have been, I can't remember the guy's name. I don't even want to say it. But regardless, he said there were multiple teams that you wouldn't even think calling about Bryce Young, teams who have established guys calling about Bryce Young, like, yo, I want that guy on my roster. We seem to be the only people that don't realize what we have. Alex, this kid is special.
Could you imagine him in like Philly? They'd rather have him than Jalen Hurts right now?
Oh my gosh. Listen, let me tell you, I said this during that game. Man, you know, those guys on the sideline of Philly were looking at what this kid was doing on those last 2 drives, really throughout the whole game. But those last 2 drives specifically, like, man, I know AJ's probably thinking in his head, like, buddy, if you were here, we'd be unbeatable. We would be unbeatable, because the level of anticipation that you throw with, you're not afraid to get rid of the ball. All those things that Bryce Young, quote unquote, struggled with early on. I'm like, all right, first, he got sacked 62 times last year. Second, it's a new offense. Of course, there was going to be some struggles. And lo and behold, when the data finally came out, who was he targeting with most of those picks that he threw in those first 2 games? Deontay Johnson. Look, Alex, I don't know how much of that interview you watched, but I had a conspiracy theory. My conspiracy theory was that the real reason that Dave Canales benched him is because he had to flush out the bad guy. He had to see, because really, you don't bench a guy like that. You let him work through the problems. The result probably still would have been the same. But I'm benching you because I got to see for myself. All right, I'm going to let you take a breather, but I got to see for myself, like, is it you or is it him? And what did they realize really quick? Oh, it's him. Get him out of here. They didn't have a succession plan. We're going to catapult X into the X, but get him out of here. Cannot do it. Can't do it. What Mike Singletary say? Can't coach him. Can't do it. Right? Got to get him out of here. So now, to the point of how Bryce sees Canales. Personally, I believe that Bryce was built for this. I do. Bryce has played. Yeah, he's just different. He's played under some really strenuous, like, look, the program that Bryce played for, he was the first black quarterback to ever play for Mater Dei and start for Mater Dei. He goes to Alabama, plays for, in the pressure cooker. Talk about pressure, man. Mac Jones just won a title. Tua won a title. You got to come in and you don't have anywhere near, like, look, respect to Jameson Williams, respect to Slade Bolden, respect to, Cameron Latu, all these guys. They're not Devontae. They're not Henry Ruggs. They're not, you know what I'm saying? They're none of those guys, right?
Jalen Waddle.
Jalen Waddle. Yeah. You don't have any of those guys, right? So, yeah, you got to go out here and man, these guys in Philly, there's a reason why people like Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter, these guys aren't surprised what they saw in Philly this year. Why? Because they watched him firsthand have 420 yards on them in an SEC championship game in the Mercedes Dome. Most in championship history to this day, right? Think about some of the quarterbacks. Yeah, crazy impressive. Think about some
people
of those
forget about that game, man.
They do. They do.
Bananas.
Man, there was one play that he threw, and he's small, so he's got to, sometimes you'll see him squat down really low whenever after he gets in his drop back, because he's getting ready to go deep. So he squat down really low, and he threw the ball. He uncorked one between the safety and the corner to Jameson in the end zone. And when they panned the camera to him after he threw that pass, he was over there screaming, man. You could see his helmet shaking because I was like, oh my God. And I saw that a couple of times this year where I was like, oh man, here we go. So yeah, you, man, gosh, man, just to kind of circle back to that whole receiver thing, man, if Tet falls, man, oh my goodness.
Yeah. And the thing is, if we do not get him a wide receiver 1, think about the incompetence of this organization. Even when Cam in 2015 was Cam, and I actually did a podcast about this because people forget how great 2015 Cam was. Yeah. How great! And I don't use these words like a lot of people use these words. Greatness is greatness.
Yeah,
he was great that year. They got him Kelvin Benjamin. Kelvin Benjamin had 9 touchdowns and 1,000 yards the year before. So they had gotten him a wide receiver 1. He just got hurt at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
They tried to put a Band-Aid over it with Ted Ginn. Ted Ginn ended up having like 9 touchdowns that year. It should have been like 21 or something. But the organization has to at least see what they have in their quarterback by getting him the proper people around him. Joe Burrow got Chase and Higgins. Hurts got Devonta Smith and AJ Brown.
Yeah.
All these quarterbacks, year 3, they get there. Tua got Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle.
Yeah.
You got to surround him with talent to see what we got in our quarterback, because 5th-year options coming soon. New contracts coming soon. And once you get that new contract, that's your team. That you are handcuffing your team to this quarterback for at least 5 years with the amount that they're getting paid now. Because you're looking at, by the time Bryce is there, you're looking at $70 million a year. So
and you know what? I'm gonna tell you something. I think Bryce is the kind of person, especially being one of the faces of NIL. Bryce has had money. His family. He comes from really, really good. He's cut from good cloth. He would possibly have been the kind of person understanding what his legacy would be if he could deliver not one, but multiple Lombardis to the Carolinas and possibly done the Tom Brady thing and take the pay cut and never necessarily be the highest paid quarterback. But boy, after what they did to him this year.
No way.
Oh, you got to run me to max. After what you did, that's going to be my payback right there. I got nothing to say. I'm going to play the best of my ability. I'm going to do everything I got to do. But buddy, when it comes contract time, you got to run me to max.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
1 billion%. Oh man, could you imagine a Lombardi? Could you imagine any championship in Charlotte? Like, we had to deal with the Hornets and the Panthers. I mean, it's been nice. Those 2 Super Bowl runs, man. 2015 was my favorite year I've ever had.
Yeah.
But you win a Super Bowl here, like LeBron won in Cleveland.
Oh man,
bro, it's
like you're immediate statue. Yeah.
Immediate statues. Like you get one in Bank of America, you get one in Uptown Charlotte, you get one in Raleigh, you get one everywhere.
But see, Alex, the thing is, man, is like, this is what's so crazy. If they can figure out this defense thing, right? This kid has that ability to deliver that, man. Like, he's just got some. I will never forget Dan Orlovsky. And I know Dan Orlovsky can be, sometimes it's hit or miss with him as far as like his belief in quarterbacks. But I remember him going on Rich Eisen's show. And this was when Chicago still had the pick. And he's like, hey, man, what should they do, with the number 1 pick? He said, listen, if I'm them, I trade Justin Fields and I'm drafting Bryce Young. And he was like, really? Yes. He said, man, this dude is different. Like, what he does, and like, yes, he's small. No, he doesn't have the strongest arm, but his vision and how he throws with anticipation, you don't see often at all.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, man, when you saw, like, okay, so he went from a pedestrian 59% last year to up to almost 62% this year. It wouldn't shock me next year if he's sub 70% completion percentage next year.
You take the drops away, like,
yeah. Oh yeah, honestly, you're right. He could be there. Yeah,
it's every football person that talks about Bryce, not talking heads, not fans. Every football person that talks about Bryce goes, yo. The Jets had 2 joint practices with him, 2023 and 2024. Yeah. Aaron Rodgers was like, whoa. Garrett Wilson, he went online and said it, but he was like, yo. Even in the blueprint, you're like, Hayden Hurst is there. Like, I mean, I turn around, the ball's there. Like, everybody's talking up this guy.
Yeah.
Bowles is like, man, watch out for this guy. Like, they all know. And it's so crazy that we as fans, because of publicly traded media companies, like, and Stephen A. Smith, who's never gotten anything right, says this is the biggest bust ever. You're like, who is he? We just had this guy say, okay.
They're paid for those hot takes because we've got people like that in our space. You know, I don't know how much, you know, how deep your range goes and who you listen to. But like, you know, when I mentioned to you that I have detractors, like, yeah, I've got people that like vehemently stand against, you know, they call me the Bryce Avenger or whatever, or, you know, all the whatever, you know, adjective you want to use. But here's the point. You said it. If the football guys see it, it's not my opinion. I get my cues from the football guys. They support what I see and just hope that I'm not seeing something that I'm not seeing. And maybe I'm just kind of looking and, you know, I'm just being an overzealous fan, which, hey, that's cool. It's, you know, I'm a fanatic. It's part of it. Right.
Sure.
And I don't discount them because look, a lot of times what's happening, especially with the Bryce, you know, talk is that there is 7 years of the mediocrity of the Carolina Panthers hoisted on his shoulders. So of course, like everybody wants to see better now than, you know, 10 years down the road. But I said this, and I want to know what you think of this. If Bryce Young is nothing more like, let's just say he never becomes all the great stuff that we hope that he can be, but he becomes the bridge to the thing that is. Right. Say that he stabilizes the organization to a point where it's like, all right, next year we win 10 games. The following year we win 11. Then we go back to 10. But every year we're in the dance. Every year we're consistent. We're a team that is to be reckoned with in the NFC South and winning that division like crazy. But we're also like a team in the playoffs. And it may not never, you know, get to the point where he has a Cam Newton fantastic season and it leads us, you know, to a Super Bowl appearance. But he sets it up for the next person that can be that next guy. To me, the draft picks, the trade, all that stuff, it was a win. If he steadies the room, it's a win. What do you say to that?
Well, we've seen it already. We saw Chris Winkie come in and have one win, and then the guy, God, what's his name? Rod. He was here for 1 year before Delhomme. Crap, what was his name?
Berline? Berline would have been earlier on.
No. It's I can't remember his name, but I have it in a different video.
Was it Vinny? Vinny Testaverde?
No. It's I'll probably put it in the comments or something.
Okay.
But he comes in and they're like a 8-8 type team, and then they go to the Super Bowl. Like he steadies the ship, like just like you said. So I completely agree with you, and it happens. You see it pretty much all the time. Like you think of like the I'm actually not in the right headspace for it, but before Brady there was Bledsoe. Before Tyrod Taylor is a good bridge. You always need Brissett just now before May. You always need the guy that's going to make you 500 before you get the next guy. Now this is like a longer portion of this. Take the Bears. The Bears butthole. Justin Fields get there. They start going 5 wins, 7 wins, and maybe they needed him to go to Caleb. Steady the ship, just like you said. So it happens all the time. I hope that's not the case for Bryce.
I hope it isn't either. But I see much greater. My fear, you know what my real fear is, Alex? My fear is that he hits his ceiling here, like he has some great years here. And then he decides and he does the Drew Brees thing and go, you know, he doesn't get hurt necessarily, but he goes to New Orleans, you know, or somewhere else and like, you know, hoist the Lombardi and we become the Chargers where, you know, we don't ever really get back there. Right. They went one time back in I think with Dan Fouts many, many years ago, but they haven't been back since. Right.
Yeah. They got the guy with, he went to the Patriots, CT guy, go ahead, never mind.
Junior Seau? Yeah.
Seau. He was on that team.
Yeah, Junior Seau was young on that team. Kellen Winslow Sr. Was on that team. Dan Fouts. I mean, they had, you know, who was their coach? It wasn't Schottenheimer, because Schottenheimer, they went 14-2 one year and lost to the Pats. But it was Coryell, Dan Coryell.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, and I mean, that team, gosh, they got there, but they hadn't been back since. You know, the Bengals, up until they got Joe Burrow, they went one time, you know, many years ago. So you could see a pathway where this team could be built that way and you know, be a perennial. But really what I love is that there are going to be some teams that are blown up this year. Like you talked about San Francisco, there's going to be a lot of teams that, get blown up. Miami, I believe, is going to get blown up. And those are teams where we're going to start those players will start coming in and, we'll get those guys and, that's where it can turn around, rather quickly. So,
yeah, we got the cap space for it. People don't think we do, but I mean, we're probably going to create 70 million. And when you sign these guys, and people just don't get it. Like Robert Hunt was a $6 or $7 million cap hit this year.
Mm-hmm.
Like when they come on, even though you're giving them a lot of money, the cap hit ain't big. So you can get a lot of good players with small cap hits. I think we're going to sign a lot of big guys, or we created the room to do that. We just got to get them. We're going to hope that they come here.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, Alex, man, this has been an absolute pleasure. Man, I appreciate, being able to come here and talk ball with you today, man. I'm sure this will be the first time of, multiple conversations that we'll have. But man, I'm honored, man. I look forward to seeing what you plan on doing moving forward with your channel, man, and anything I can do to assist, man. I'm always here for that.
Yo, I really, really, really appreciate it, man. I see guys that talk ball at a high level, and I always kind of want to do it, and I kind of just got the nerve to reach out because I wanted to start talking to people again, but I can't talk to people that speak ball on like a lower level. I mean, if that makes sense, I don't want to be mean, but you speak it like just you right then talking about like the old school Bengals and Chargers. I had those conversations with like my grandfather and my father, like those are the kind of guys that I have those conversations with, and not like just random guys at the bar.
Right.
So I get tired of having the Bryce Young's too small conversation versus the high level, what does Bryce think about Canales? So it's a pleasure talking about this kind of stuff.
Likewise.
And, I really look forward to doing it again. And thank you so much for taking the time to do it.
For sure, man. Anytime, man. I appreciate you. Appreciate you having me for sure.
Yeah. And if you want to tell people how to come watch your stuff, and I'm sure I'll put all that stuff in the comments as well, or in the show thing as well, but I'll give you a shot right now to tell them.
Absolutely, man. So you can find me at One Carolina. That's ONE Carolina. Anywhere you search me, you will find me, whether it's on YouTube, X, Instagram, just either One Carolina or The One Carolina Show. Whichever way you type it in, you'll be able to see my big, ugly face. You'll be able to no, I'm just kidding.
They're watching this. They watch me. So
you'll be able to join in on the conversation. Alex says that I talk ball at a high level. I don't know. One of the things that I really want to learn is to talk ball on a high level, like learning actual, formations, things like that, learning how to
dunk
watch film. Yeah, like dunk, because Dunk played college football, so he's got a, huge advantage. Yeah, but I love what he does. And, there's a time that I may get into that space a little bit. But for me, it's more just, a conversation and narratives, things like that, because I always feel like there's a place for that. And it's always fun to do, because that part of it is the majority level conversation that most of us have. And it's okay to kind of dive into deeper, like you said, like sometimes it can be very surface level, like, you see something and you always kind of scam Newton, whatever, or man, he should have jumped on that football, or whatever. And it's just like, come on, man, like let's talk a little deeper than that. You know what I mean? So
where are these guys from?
Right.
I'm trying to think, what city is that? Like, I don't even want to mention the city because somebody might be listening from that city.
I grew up in the sticks of Western North Carolina, so I spent. I'll tell you, Alex, this is the honest truth. I have to catch myself sometimes because I spent so long of my life like shaping my dialogue to not sound like that, because everybody that I have in my family, that's how they sound. Like my dad, my uncles, like I have an uncle that he kind of sounds just like that. And he always gives me heck about it. Hey, Cam Newton should jump on that football, boy. I'm like, man, get out of here, man.
Bro, I did this in my Cam Newton video, and you always see one angle of this video, right? Mm-hmm. Where Cam looks like he's really close to the football. He's not. I was in the end zone at that game, and I'm surrounded by people. No one brought it up once. Really? No one. It didn't even. It wasn't even a conversation. Like Cam just didn't even look like he had a shot. Like immediately the ball was out and DeMarcus Ware was on it. And we were just like, okay, that sucks. Next play.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until the next day that I saw this all over TV. And I'm like, what is going on? Why is this a narrative? Like I missed that, even though I'm watching the whole game right there. I didn't move 1 inch. I had to pee so bad in the fourth quarter, but I didn't move at all because we had Beyonce and Coldplay at halftime, and I wanted to watch that. And nobody even, and we were all talking to each other. We had Broncos fans and Panthers fans and the no fans that were just there for the Super Bowl. Nobody said anything. And you always see that one angle where it looks like he's close, but even when he looks like he's close, you pause it. I put it on X. DeMarcus Ware's hands like touching this, like it's like 6 inches away from the ball.
Yeah. Well, not only that, though, if he really dives and goes after that ball like that, what we experienced from him in 2018 with the shoulder situation could have happened much earlier, because he could have really got hurt going after that ball, man. So like, I've never been one of those people that's like, been mad about that. I guess in the moment I'm like, man, I wish you kind of, just watching it in that moment because you're so passionate about the game. But I immediately understood right after the play. And like you, I just kind of moved on. But yeah, not my uncles, man. You crazy boy. He should have jumped on that ball there. I'm like,
you think Tom Brady's doing that? You think Patrick Mahomes doing that? You think Drew Brees is doing that? No way.
No.
Stop putting him on a pedestal, man.
Yeah, not a chance.
So annoying.
Not a chance.
Anyway, I have a whole pod about this coming out after this one. So anybody wants to listen to it, I try to find something that's uplifting. And I talk about, y'all need to remember 2015 Cam, because it makes you feel better just not being negative all the time about this team. But yeah, so if you're still listening, watch that one. But anyways, we'll get out of here. I appreciate you so much, man. And until next time, I'll see you and keep pounding.
Keep pounding.